Hey, Pete.
Yo, Elliot, what's shaking, man?
Nothing much. Just had too big of a lunch, let me tell you.
Nice.
Oh, hey, Mark.
Hey, there's the man of the moment. What's up? Hey, Mark.
How
Good
we
to
doing,
see
guys?
you. Excellent. What are we doing today, Elliot?
Well, today we're here, obviously, for a fireside chat with Marc Wendling.
How are you doing?
Hello.
Before we get into the content, speaking of lunch, just gonna start with an inspired icebreaker. Today's question is gonna be, what type of toppings do you like on your mac and cheese?
Oh,
Pete, you want to start us off?
my mac and cheese. I think I'm gonna go with breadcrumbs. How's that go? Yeah.
Classic.
Does that sound about right? Mark, what about you? If I recall correctly, you're originally from France, I'm trying to remember. So maybe mac and cheese is like maybe that's anathema. But what's your favorite there? Oh, you there?
I
Mark
guess
doesn't
we'll give him a
like
second.
Mark doesn't like mac and cheese. Excellent. Well, why don't you go ahead and do intros here, Elliot?
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so we're here today for the fireside chat with Marc Wendling. Today's event is brought to you by the team here at Modern Sales Pros. For everybody not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they struggle to solve on their own and help them see around corners that they may not know about. We do that through live sessions like this, an online forum, and our quarterly summits. If you're not already a part of MSP, you can be invited to join after this event. Before we dive into the event, just going to go over some quick housekeeping notes. First, this event is being recorded, so you're going to be able to access the recording and key takeaways on the previous events page of the MSP website. If there's any questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A function or the chat feature, and they're going to do their best to get to them during the event. Amazing. Okay, I'm going to pass things over to you, Pete. Do some intros on Atrium and you guys yourselves. See you at the end.
All right. What's up, Mark? I haven't seen you in a hot second. I know you're out at the Snowflake offices in Dublin. Not
That's
quite
right.
as much fun as the Snowflake office, the Bank Vault office in San Mateo. That one was fantastic with the old vault. It was crazy.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Oh wow, you remember that one? Yes, we
oh, it
had
was
yeah, yeah. It was interesting. There was a big vault at the back of the office, and this is where we would have our flu shots every year, which is weird.
That's pretty funny. Time to go in the vault. Well,
Was
hey
it?
everyone. Yeah, as Elliot mentioned, this today's event is sponsored by Atrium. So for folks who aren't familiar, Atrium makes data-driven sales management software that helps organizations align their go-to-market teams to embed a culture of data-driven management from the top to the bottom. Um, and I think I'm really excited to talk with Mark here today because I've known Mark for a hot second here. I met him when I was originally doing customer research on Atrium back in the day, back when he was leading sales at MindTickle before he moved over to Snowflake, and Snowflake's been a bit of a ride. I'm really excited for us to talk about that today. In terms of intros, my name is Pete Kazanji. I'm one of the founders of Atrium, but also of Modern Sales Pros. Prior to Atrium, I started a recruiting software company called Talentbin that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014, and that's really where I went from being kind of like a generalist founder, kind of like business founder to first seller, sales manager, sales leader, and then when we were acquired by Monster, I was responsible for new product sales at Monster Worldwide. So like a 500-person sales organization versus like the 20-person sales organization at TalentBin. Also ended up writing a book on startup sales called Founding Sales as well. But enough about me. Mark, maybe you can kind of give folks like quick TLDR on the last couple roles that you've had, and then we'll kind of get into the story of Snowflake. Okay?
Yeah, of course. Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me.
Of course.
It's an absolute honor. And so, look, I mean, I'm Marc Wendling. I run the SMB department for the sales organization at Snowflake, which is very much dedicated to go after startups, so early to growth phase companies that will be eventually powered by the Snowflake data cloud. And over the last like 10-ish years, I switched from having more of a GM type of profile and selling to many, many different things to managing what is typically called like corporate sales functions,
Yep.
except at my where I was leading the whole thing.
Yep.
So what for the last few years, what I do is I trained a lot of early stage sales professionals to go and sell things, and it is interesting to say the least.
It's a machine.
Both, yeah. I would say that for from Mindtickle to today, I've been a sales educator as well as driving revenue for the companies I work for. So that's who I am.
Yeah, and a member of the ClearSlide mafia, if I recall
Yes.
correctly. It's
Yep.
yeah, there's like it's kind of a it's like a down low sales mafia, but like when ClearSlide was in ascension, there was a very it was quite the sales organization there.
It was amazing. Look, if you look at ClearSlide back in the years, like the number of like extremely talented people that went through it is amazing. It's just unbelievable. Carlos de la Torre was leading enterprise. Jim
Yep.
Honeywell is now CRO. Plenty of people. And I owe ClearSlide my connection to who is probably the most influential person in my life, John McMahon. Right. So without ClearSlide, I would not have been connected to John, and here I am today. A lot of what I'm doing is preaching, what he invented. So
Was John on the board at ClearSlide? What was his connection to Clear? Now it makes sense that ClearSlide had such a muscular PTC vibe.
Yeah. So John essentially was brought over as an advisor by Carlos, for the founders. So the funny story is the first time I met with John, I had no idea who he was, and I was put in a meeting room with him for an hour, and I was myself, no filter, which is probably the best thing that happened to me because I was not nervous. And then after that meeting, it appears that he had a good experience with me because we stayed in touch, and he helped me get in front of Sumo Logic in the days. He helped me here at Snowflake. But then after I realized who he was, I freaked out.
You're like, oh man, hope I didn't fuck that up.
That's right. That's exactly. So it's funny how coincidence can trigger a lot of changes.
What you don't know can't hurt you. Yeah, we actually had a fireside chat with John to give out his book. If folks haven't gotten a copy of John's Qualified Sales Leader, it's absolutely fantastic. It's like, I mean, there's good like lessons in it, but also it's like, got a bunch of kind of like fun like war stories in it as well. It's pretty fantastic. But enough about that. We're going to talk about Snowflake here. So I think probably first and foremost, I think what might be kind of fun is for to just kind of characterize to everybody kind of like the size of the SMB corporate sales organization and kind of like where it's located right now, because I'm sure it's a lot bigger than certainly when you first joined and I was meeting with you like 3 or 4 years ago or what have you. How big's the SMB corporate sales team now?
So today it's if you look at just the sellers and leadership, it's around like 200 people, and you add close to 100 on top of that on the SE side. So it's almost 300 people. And I want to make sure that I'm cautiously sharing revenue information. That's something that's published on our earnings, but this is definitely in the double digits in market share from a revenue standpoint, and anywhere between 15 to 20% of the growth of the business every quarter, and clearly the new logo acquisition machine. So it's and it's highly productive. It's been a fun thing to drive because on top of that, we sell to early companies We have opportunities to sell to CEOs, CPOs, and all that. That very, very smart people, and we put a lot of them on the map. I remember 5 or 6 years ago we started signing a deal with Marquetta in Oakland, and they were an early stage company, and look at that, they are public now, and there's plenty of other examples that we have right here. So it's been an enormous journey and fantastic for people.
And I know originally Snowflake's sales organization was based in San Mateo, but at this point, like, it's obviously worldwide. Where are the various hubs that the SMB sales organization has right now?
Yeah. So in 2018, we went further east and opened a hub in Denver. And it was at a time where I was under the belief that you needed very much like a centralized hub-based inside / corporate sales group. And look, I mean, if you remember back in 2020, we all told each other, "See you in 2 weeks."
Yeah.
So that ended up being 2 years. So the whole being in the office dynamic, that is very important for a young crew. Plus, like having the corporate organization is very lean. So we typically have a 1-9, 1-10 ratio, manager to rep. So being in an office, you can hear, you can listen, you can help. There's a lot of contextual feedback that can come in when you're at home. What do you do? So we onboarded Gong, which has been a phenomenal, enablement and honestly, like, revenue generation driver for us. And with that, my notion now is like, what? As long as you have a team in an office, that's enough critical mass. So we have Seattle, San Mateo, Denver, Atlanta, Boston. We have a team in Leeds, UK, London, Amsterdam, Paris, Berlin. So I'm good on.
Yeah, I want to talk about this because, I love this. I guess because you are very much like, you're like the sales dean, right? Like the sales college dean. And it's funny because for folks that Mark kind of elided this earlier, so he used to lead sales at a company called MindTickle that is one of the like main market share owners. For like LMS, like sales development. I don't know, like what the category you would call it, but it's just like learning and development for sellers, right? And so I think you obviously have like really good subject matter expertise, obviously having sold it, but also throughout your career you've matured a bunch. The term I like to use is like, you take lead and you turn it into copper, and then eventually, ideally, you turn it into gold, right? And like, you've done that with like hundreds and hundreds of sellers, and like, of course, the SMB and corporate like segments is part of the motion, right? Because you're not oftentimes you're not hiring like proven people. You literally are taking people. You're taking tin and you're turning it into bronze, right? On the way to being gold. And I think what's fascinating here is what you've landed on is a hub model where it's not like you don't need a 100-person or 200-person sales floor, but it's not individuals working from it's not individual 26-year-olds or 28-year-olds working from their home office. And by home office, I mean a desk in the corner of like the kitchen or what have you. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about that hub model. Like, what's the minimum size? What's the structure of it? Is it like there's a manager and their team, or is it matrix where some of these people report to other managers? Like, how does that work? Because I think that would be really fascinating for folks.
I was born and raised in France, so I like disorganized mess or organized mess. And
that's a very au courant joke right there. I like it.
And for instance, it works a little bit like that, because like, as long as we have 10 people from the team in a location, we good. Now, for instance, so my team is now split in 3 different motions because we serve different type of customers. Okay. So you have one that is almost exclusively transactional, very, very SMB, for the companies that are not necessarily going to like go and sell data for a living. The ones that use Snowflake on an internal basis. This is heavily transactional.
Like an IT person who's like using their cloud data warehouse to back their own like internal like Looker Looker or Tableau versus like actually a part of their product.
Yes. And then you have two other groups that are selling product. I mean, completely, pitching VPs of products or chief product officers.
Yep.
But, as long as I have 10 of one of these, I don't care. They can report to a manager. I have people in Denver reporting to someone in Atlanta. I have people in Boston reporting to someone in San Mateo. It doesn't matter, because the truth is what my big effort has always been focused on is that everyone is part of the same umbrella, same team. So whether you go to one manager or another, you should get, probably a slightly different like style, words, all that stuff, but you should still get the same coaching. It's if you have enabled your team to very much think and operate the same way, the response coming from leadership should be the same. It's just that we also essentially creating a lot of like team effort and connection, because you will have someone that has 3-4 years of experience that will be coached by someone that just joined Snowflake, and vice versa. So it's all about trying to accelerate ramp for everyone, because one of the keys of our success is making sure that people ramp as fast as possible. And get as productive and as fast as possible. So having people from different organizations, different team, different tenure all together makes it actually work remarkably well. I was a little nervous at first.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I went there in reverse gear, but ultimately it proved out to be so successful that this is the model I'm pushing hard for every other team at Snowflake.
I think that makes sense, because like, if you think about the things that like sellers need, right? Like, what do sellers need? They need esprit de corps, right?
Right.
They need, because like sales is hard, and so you get off a call where like some prospect was mean to you, right? Like we've all, yeah, I was gonna say, right? You get off a call where a prospect was mean to you, and if you're just like sitting there like silently at like your kitchen table or at like your little desk in the corner of the your apartment kitchen, it's like terrible, right? Versus if you're sitting next to 3 other people. Now, I think that's a great insight on your part, which is like, and that and this gal right here could be a mid-market seller, and this guy right here could maybe be like a sales engineer, right? And this guy right here could be an SDR, but at least I have like, that esprit de corps there. So that's like one thing, and that probably doesn't require homogeneity of the sales motion, right? It's just like, it's another snowflake, or what do you guys call them? Snowflakes?
Snowflake. Yeah.
Another snowflake. There's another snowflake next to you, or a couple of them. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is just like, honestly, just like asking people questions. And I think because we all like try our damnedest to get our like knowledge management solutions in the places where they should be, whether you're talking about like Guru or like, when you're like it's part of the LMS, or it's like Notion or whatever, but like the God's on it, or of course like people hitting each other via Slack or what have you. But the God's honest truth is that all of that has like very, very, very substantial friction in it. And so I think that like just being able to ask another AE, even if that AE is an enterprise AE or a mid-market AE or whatever, is that's like totally fine, right?
There's also something else is on the celebration side, because look, I mean, everyone in the team, is just like, okay, well, you have an enterprise rep that happens to have a 6 to 9 month sales process. If he's close to a corporate rep that wins 5 deals a quarter, knowing people, celebrating like that, it's motivating.
That's true.
And it's because like it's funny when some of my team members get promoted to the enterprise or straight to John Sapone's organization on the global 2000 teams, they say, I don't have anything to celebrate. It's like, well, come back and sit down with us, because we celebrate all the time.
That's right.
And it's part of the, look, I mean, everyone needs to feel good. It's not just when you
it's all motivated. Like, right. I think that's an important thing, because at this point, Atrium works with like hundreds and hundreds of organizations, and we have organizations that are down, like we help organizations measure and manage their SDR teams and their corporate AE teams, their SMB teams, but also the enterprise teams too, because like obviously paying attention to leading indicators becomes a lot more important. Like, it's always important, but it becomes all the more important where if you're only closing, say, like 10 deals a year, and maybe they're all like backloaded on a quarterly basis or whatever. Obviously, it's astronomically important to be paying attention to the leading indicators of like how many opportunities are getting to this stage, essentially like treating stage advancements as like a micro win itself. But I think it's a really fair point, which is, but then setting that person next to the corporate rep who's like banging the gong on a weekly basis, at least like keeps up the esprit de corps, and also like drives accountability as well, right? Yeah, I think that's fascinating. So in every single one of those hubs, you have at least 10 people, but maybe even more. Like in Denver, I'm sure you guys have like dozens, I would imagine, right?
Denver, I think we probably have like 40 people, something like this, right? So in certain locations, we have like many more. Yeah.
But that's like so powerful because that then it allows you to tap into these different like talent pools, right?
Yeah.
But still get the upside of the esprit de corps, like co-accountability, learning, celebration, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Talent pool. So I think there are two things I've been working on over the years to expand the talent pool. One, location, right? You need to understand that the more locations you have access to, the more you are able to de-risk either competition showing up, or someone trying to outpay you, or things like these that can have consequences over time. But the other thing that you can do also is simplify your sales framework. And make sure that everything you do does not require a PhD in smartness.
Sure.
Just know it's I always use the example of for those who ride. I mean, I ride motorcycles, and I always ask when unborn people who rides a bike, and most people don't, but I explain the principle of the sequential gearbox. It's 1 neutral, 2 3 4 5 6, and you cannot skip a gear. Same in sales. If you are able to just like implement the right motion where everyone just has to, go one step in front of another, you expand the pool of candidates you have access to. And it also allows you to like not hire just clones. You hire a rich type of individuals together, and they get better together. And that is, so both the location and the simplification of the model are great to just like diversify the candidate pool.
Nice. I love it. Well, I think changing gears a little bit here, I think a key thing that I would love to touch on is related to that, which is you guys sell to a pretty technical audience, right? And you guys sell to a pretty technical audience, and then moreover, like you do have sales engineers that are involved, but like what is like but the deal sizes aren't sufficiently large that like you can have lots and lots and lots of sales engineering involved necessarily, right? So like how do you work with, and this is related to the simplification piece, how do you work with how do you work with your sellers in order to help them like come up this like technical learning curve in order to make the economics pencil, especially like in this velocity motion?
Yeah, I think it's what we did when we started was focusing on the storytelling aspect of it, around the data flow. So even though we have a very technical audience, the least technical people that we sell to are product leaders. So which means that they are rather technical themselves, and then we of course sell to engineering and all that. And if they realize that your direct seller knows the flow, understands very well the differentiators of Snowflake, has a ton of good stories to share about, winning stories from customers, then they can definitely drive. We use command of the message, what John McMahon invented, right? We use a simplified version of that framework, and they need to make sure that they are making the customers or the prospects tell you what's the current state, future state, up to the positive business outcomes. And they need to be absolutely stellar, not necessarily in how technical the Snowflake is. They don't need to just like, get under the hood. They need to know the differentiators. We have very strong competitors. But look, the market itself is not necessarily mature enough that the differentiators are, minimized. Every player in this market has advantages. and you need to know exactly how you compete against them. That's the key. Instead of asking them to become technical monkeys, they need to know the flow, understand the differentiators, and know enough stories that they will be able to put things in context in a simplified command of the message motion for their prospects. That's how we've been able to do it.
Nice. And so does that just mean like, so you guys have just done it in a very structured way where you have like, the value drivers in it, like command and message value drivers, and then there's like, two or three stories for each of these, and got it. And so how do you guys train on that? You just like they just get drilled on that in like the LMS until they pass out
they
on
get
it,
hammered
or
on
what?
that, and it's so important to me personally that I do it myself. I mean, it may sound counter because obviously I spend a fair amount of hours on it, but that also gives me a great opportunity to know the team because I want to have a pulse on people. It's I always tell them when they onboard, you don't work for me, I work for you. If you win, I win. So I spend a fair amount of time making sure that they are fully enabled there, and it works out. And it's again, it creates a bond and connection.
Yep.
It's as you said, the dean. My I don't know if I should share that, but for a while, my nickname was Snow Dad.
I love it.
And so yeah,
I buy it. I think I actually forgot to mention this earlier, but because we're talking about sales nerdy stuff right now, unsurprisingly. But if folks would like to get a one of our cool sales nerd hoodies, I'm actually wearing an early prototype of it right now, and also some of our manager metrics driver trees. We're going to go ahead and drop a link for folks that just sign up for that here. We'll send you a one of our sales nerd hoodies there. But I think there was actually, so related to enablement, Wendy had a question here on ramp acceleration and and enablement. Maybe you can talk a little bit about like what onboarding looks like in the first like 30 to 60 days for these SMB and corporate reps.
Yeah, so there's a couple of motions that start in parallel for them, unless if they are internal SDR promotions, they don't necessarily go through the same type of enablement. But someone new that would join Snowflake in this function from outside, they will go through the same enablement first as the enterprise team. So again, they create bond connection. They know the overall positioning of Snowflake, the data cloud. But then immediately after, they get a 2-week completely dedicated bootcamp for our motion. And they are going to learn a ton of stories. They are going to, again, be educated in the early stage of command of the message, our differentiators, etc. They will talk to customers. They will listen to many customer stories. They will do mock conversations, plenty of stuff. So there's a graduation process after that. But the expectation is pretty clear for the first 3 weeks. You're not picking up the phone per se. You are being enabled. You learn. It takes a while, and after that, the soft expectation is that they are able to create connections with prospects and then essentially initiate conversations. So it's a semi-structured onboarding process, I should say. But a lot of it is, again, about telling the story and understanding the data flow for anybody that is powered by Snowflake.
Nice. And then subsequent to that, like from a leading indicator standpoint, like how do you guys pay attention to how they're kind of coming into band? Because obviously they get like, they get pitch certified or like, customer story certified and what have you. Then subsequent to that, like, are there any like particular metrics that you guys pay attention to as they're coming into band, so on and so forth?
So the core metric that I'm almost obsessed by, I will admit, is productivity per head. The productivity per head for us, it's about growth ACV booked. And so I have if you think about the motion that we are driving, we do have a fair amount of 7 figures, occasional 8-figure deals, because some of the startups are really, really banking on Snowflake to build their product.
Sure.
But our ramped productivity is never going to match what our friends at enterprise can do, because they have $100 million contracts. So if I want to continue having my team be successful, the ramping productivity is the key. And we've been able to essentially put everyone to a productive state around month 4.
Mhm.
You know that if you make it to month 4, the projected 12-month out is the same as any ramp rep. So this is the kind of the North Pole that I'm pursuing.
Mhm.
But between that stage and when they start, it's all about how many opportunities they are able to just like put together. These
Yep.
opportunities essentially created when the POC starts.
Yep.
And then I don't necessarily track soft metrics per se, new meetings, whatever. I obviously we do, but what
Yeah.
I pay attention to is the conversion between steps,
Yeah.
right? So
Exactly.
okay, how many email? Because if you think about it, like uh, I think the mistake is to say you need to send 50 emails a day in order to have 5 emails, right?
People,
Because
it always cracks my reps up. Like we always joke about it. Like when somebody is like, "How many touches does it take to close a deal?" And it's like, "Oh,
uh,
that's not how that works, right?" Like it's like it's not causal. It's like
no,
you want to measure the quantity of behavior to make sure that people are actually like hustling and doing their work, right? But then you have to measure the quality, which of course is echoed in the conversion rate. So you can't just say like, "Hey, you need to send more emails to all your like." Hey, checking in, Mark. Hey, checking in, Mark. Hey, checking in, Mark. All right, like more activity. These deals are going to close.
yeah,
Like you want to make sure that it's actually like the hustle. There's actual hustle there, but that in and of itself is not actually going to drive the output.
yeah. Look, when you go to the gym, I mean, some people go to the gym very frequently, and you have people that will need 10 times the effort to show a marginal progress,
Yeah.
and some others will go to the gym twice and they will look like a beef. And it's the same in sales. I mean, you can't just everything has to be individualized. But what matters ultimately is our North Pole is productivity, especially the ramping one. So we'll see pretty quickly whether there are adjustments needed, and there will be a lot of course corrections occasionally, just for the individual, because we want to have an individual coaching plan.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately, occasionally it doesn't work out. But if it doesn't work out, I insist that we help that individual find their next spot.
Yeah.
Because look, it's part of how we need to be extremely respectful to top and lower performers.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one kind of like leading indicator you're referring to there, and I do a master class on data-driven ramp management, but kind of key stage attainments. I guess I was kind of referring to this earlier a little bit as relates to the enterprise reps, where it's like treat an opportunity, right, a deal cycle as like a series of wayposts, and obviously
That's right.
like the win is like yay, like that's obviously a very important waypost, but the one of the jokes I always like to say is like if you send more contracts you close more deals. Now it's kind of related to the email thing. It's like, oh, should I just after every disco call I should just send them a DocuSign? It's like, no, that's not actually how it works, right? But like if you get more ops to contract
Yeah.
out, then guess what? You will close more deals. And then similarly, if you get more ops to like proposal, then you will probably send more contracts. And then moreover, like in order to earn the right to have a commercial conversation, there might be some precursor stage, which might be like POC or whatever. Like Atrium is a good
Yep.
example of this, where we have a stage where, because it takes like 3 minutes to turn on an Atrium account, organizations will just turn on a free account in order to see how it will help them with their data-driven sales management initiatives. So we actually KPI, like obviously a new opportunity coming into someone's pipe is that's important, but where things
Mm.
get really serious is where an organization like turns on an Atrium account, right? And so like, is the deal done there? No, it's not, but there's a much higher win rate from that stage than there is from disco, right?
Right.
And so
Mhm.
and so these are important things to be paying attention to. One thing I wanted to ask about is, so like at this point you've been at Snowflake 5 years now.
6 years,
Six.
2 weeks ago. So yes,
Yeah, so
6 years.
when you joined, columnar cloud data warehouses were kind of like a newish thing, right?
Yeah.
And like, oh, it's like this newfangled thing over there, and so now it's just kind of like, it's ridden the curve of the adoption curve. And
Yeah.
so early on it was like, the hot, early stage companies or mid-market companies are like, yeah, like we'll take a flyer on that crazy thing, whereas now the 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 sets of folks that you're talking to is obviously like the TAM has expanded quite a bit. And so now your organization, I think you kind of alluded to this earlier, your organization is talking to IT personnel or like technical personnel, not necessarily product. That's part of your org, who are in that late adopter, kind of like late majority, late adopter, et cetera phase. How have you guys managed that transition from selling to high flying startups and what have you to kind of like the rest of the world, if you will?
So the interesting part is one of the big aspect of the data cloud is our ability to share data between companies.
Huh.
And so it's very much. I mean, we essentially enabling data circulation. That's an absolute massive differentiator for Snowflake. And
Interesting.
when I joined, we clearly had not crossed the chasm. I mean,
Yep.
and as you may imagine, sometimes depending on where you called to, saying that you called from Snowflake was met with interesting laughs.
Yeah,
Uh,
right, exactly. Like, what do you
it's
mean?
just like
Yeah.
what?
What
It's
what is this? Do you guys make like
yeah.
cotton candy? Get out of here.
That's right. That said, though, and on that topic, I remember listening to Chris Degnan, my amazing CRO. He was on a call with a then prospect that told him, "I'm not a risk taker. I'm not going to move to Snow. I'm not going to move Snowflake. I'll stay with where I am." That person happened to that person was fired 6 months after.
Yeah.
And eventually Snowflake won the deal. But like it was very much difficult back then to get past the early adopters. Um, but as we landed a ton of deals that were starting to sell themselves to more old-fashioned companies, they forced these old-fashioned companies, to at least evaluate Snowflake, because they
Exactly.
knew that the actual transaction itself for them would be, essentially facilitated. And then so they started to look around and it's like, wait, what is that? And they realized the power of it. And that was literally the product itself is so magical, to be honest. We're very lucky salespeople that it enabled companies to realize that if they use Snowflake as well, a lot of transactions would be enabled or facilitated.
Mhm.
And that is definitely something that was super helpful over the time, and then we continuing benefiting from it.
Nice. Yeah, I think a lot of organizations are probably thinking about this right now as relates to kind of the current like SaaS recession and what have you. And I mean, we have certainly seen this with like Atrium, where in the first couple of years of our existence, like at this point, we have like many hundreds of customers, and like we started out with like smaller organizations where they didn't really have a metrics harness in place, and so like maybe they had like a VP of sales and an SDR manager, or one or two sales managers, and now what we've come to realize is that it's the much larger organizations that are giving you like greater benefit from it, because when you have 10 or 20 or 30 managers, getting them to manage consistently from a shared playbook with like the relevant like metrical assets ends up being a very like it becomes more and more important. And so those organizations have a tendency, like you don't get to be like a 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 sales manager organization like overnight. So they have a tendency to be a little bit older, a little bit like they move more slowly. They have like legacy solutions deployed, like Tableau or what have you, and kind of like the challenges associated with that. But what we've found is like you just ladder into them, right? Like somebody from one of these high flying organizations lands in one of the larger organizations, and like you just got to really make sure that you're following your champions and you're really like stoked users.
Yeah.
All of those things can be very powerful. And then also the power of the customer stories,
Yeah.
like just getting a really great like highly referenceable customer that you've just knocked the ball out of the park with, and then just use them as like the tip of the spear, to then go to other organizations that look very narrowly like them. Not like, oh, you're a similar size. It's like, no. Same size, same
Yeah.
market, same vertical, etc. And like that might make you sad, because you're like, oh, okay, this organization doesn't have like thousands of analogs, but it's like, yeah, but they probably have like many dozens, and maybe even into the hundreds.
Yeah.
And so focusing in there can be very powerful.
Yeah.
Sounds like you guys did that quite a bit.
We did that, and I think there are two things I would add to this. Like it's for every sales leader, be laser focused on your ICP. bullseye. Don't
Yeah.
waste your time for things that are even peripheral. They may be very nice and they want to work with you, but they're going to be a pain. Not a
Yeah.
pain because they're bad people, a pain because given that they are a corner case around your offering, they will make you waste time. They will
Yeah.
force your product people to innovate in a direction that's not going to follow the market. So know your ICP very much. Stay there because at some point it will go super, super, super fast. I remember grabbing Manny Medina from Outreach at
I'm gonna be in Seattle in 2 weeks. We're having breakfast.
so at a sales at Dreamforce, and I ping him. I was at Mind Tickle back then. It's like, dude, we need to partner. We need to go and sell together to the McMahon Mafia because not what they care is and they care about consistency. They are really people that want
Right.
things to be done a certain way.
And
So
pipe gen Tuesdays, which
that's right. So you
which
have
outreach can help with.
That's right. Outreach is perfect for that. And by the way, in order for them to execute consistently, I have the tool for it. We
Yeah.
went so fast. I mean, we landed like, and Carlos de Torre helped, John McMahon helped also, but it's like, it was literally just like, all right, and then one after another, like dominoes, and it
Yep.
worked out great. We did the
I think
same
that's
here.
that's a really underappreciated thing is mafia selling. I don't know. That's probably not the best turn of phrase,
Probably
but
not
like you
yet.
get my point, right? Like we actually see this
Network.
quite a bit with Atrium. Yeah, network selling. Actually, this is so funny. I brought up the ClearSlide example because with here at Atrium, what ends up happening is like we it's like the coaching trees. Like we know the organizations that had really great sales management and sales leadership because they have a tendency to really resonate with our offering because they were precociously data driven even
Mhm,
like a decade ago
mhm,
when it was very difficult to do. And so the organizations that we've seen there's like former ClearSlide leaders, former Box leaders, former LinkedIn leaders, former MuleSoft leaders, former PTC leaders, et cetera, former MongoDB, which of course is very PTC.
yeah,
So I think that's actually a really good insight there is like, can you go and find the people who are the humans that
mhm,
are that not just organizationally, but it's like, oh, the people who come from the same kind of coaching
right,
trees,
yeah,
because they're going to be more prone to resonate there.
right.
And that probably could apply to, to a lot of people who are here on the
Most,
call.
most of the people, for sure.
Yeah. Related to the kind of the PTC diaspora, Wendy has a question here. Excuse me, not Wendy. Sophia has a question here regarding, how important implementing a sales methodology
Mhm,
has been. And it sounds like, I mean, you were talking about a little bit like simplification, paint by numbers, keep it like, swim lanes, et cetera. You guys obviously use command of the message. Maybe you can kind of talk a little bit about that, like how you guys did that and kind of the impacts associated with that, especially with like junior sellers.
Yeah, Evan, look, it's a for junior sellers, it's an education, it's a mindset change. I would say that, right? And here's the thing, once you are starting to educating them on like current state, future state, etc.
Yep.
I always give them a homework. Not everyone plays game there, but the homework is go home and run command of the message with either your spouse, partner, girlfriend, boyfriend, friends, mom, cousins, whatever,
I love this.
and come back to me on Monday and tell me that you did exactly what you wanted to do this weekend, not what they wanted, even though they think that they made the decision. And the occasional kid that comes back on Monday and say, "I did that, it worked," and it's just like, and then you're just like, you see, you converted. Here we go.
That's
Um,
so funny. So
yeah.
what would be an example of
Oh,
this? Like give us an example of like doing command of the message with your significant other. Um, Mark, I mean, obviously you're from France originally, so you hate wine.
yeah.
How like how would we use command of the message to lead somebody to realize that we really should go wine tasting in Napa or something like that? What would be what would be an example of
So
like doing this with your
the key is
significant other?
I'm gonna use someone as example. Like I'd say, hey, you know
Okay.
what? Like, my friend Jimmy did that. Did you see the pictures that they sent us about that tasting? It looks amazing. They had a great experience. And then it's like, what do you want to do this weekend? Oh, I don't know. That actually sounds like a great idea. Oh, okay. what other, what are the criterias? I mean, what is your goal? It's like, would you rather go inside, outside, etc.? And then every time I end up at Iron Horse in Sebastopol, and
Oh man, I love this. If folks haven't read, yeah, if you want to like an interesting kind of like light intro to command of the message and also like medpic and what have you, John McMahon's Qualified Sales Leader is really fun in this regard. Not because it's like formally written or what have you. It's more written as like a
easy to read.
narrative, and yeah, it's super easy to read. Like it's written as a narrative, it's written as a parable, and like probably my favorite chapter in there is this is very brief chapter on discovery and like very impactful discovery, where John, I won't spoil it, but essentially John retells the a story of being called by an insurance salesman who essentially like completely drags him through the pain associated with not having sufficient life insurance. So I'm not going to ruin it for folks. You should Google it because it's called The Box Up. It's absolutely fantastic and it's like a very visceral demonstration of compelling discovery.
Yeah.
Well, so one thing on the topic of sales leader, or sorry, like very compelling leaders, John McMahon being one, and but you guys, you've been at Snowflake across kind of multiple eras. There was like the startup period, and then then there was when Frank Slootman joined.
Yeah.
And Frank Slootman is really famous. He has his own book,
Amp it up.
Amped Up. Yeah,
Yeah.
Amped Up. Maybe you can share a little bit about kind of like how that changed the corporate culture and kind of like what
Sure.
kind of what that mindset is.
So I'd say that right before Frank joined, we were very much in. So we had a couple of monster rounds, in like 3, 4, $500 million worth of funding,
Yeah,
which
it's
is
crazy.
huge.
Yeah,
And when you go through that, you lose, you lose focus a little bit because you are
yeah,
tasked to hire. And at that time, we were not at $1 billion worth of revenue yet. So the motto was like hire for $1 billion. And then Frank joins and tells us, no, 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 no. You're not going to hire for $1 billion. You're going to organize for $1 billion. And he something that I did not have in my vocabulary back then was yield. And now I have it. Because the idea is, look, I mean, we need to just drive yield. We need to get there, and he also incorporated notions of unit economics and all that thing. So we switched from being this very Silicon Valley startup. We gonna burn, 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 and grow, 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 to like, no, 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 no. We are going to be very efficiently going to a certain goal, but we are going to think about it, and we're only going to hire the very people we need in order to get the organization to be productive. And the second thing he said, which really hit home for many of us, because keep in mind, Snowflake, we may be a large, like 50 to $70 billion valuation company. Truth is, we compete with very large. We compete with AWS, even though we're
yeah,
very, very good partners. But we compete with Google and all that stuff. We at least we are in the frenemy zone occasionally. And here's the thing: it's like we were super small back then, and
yeah,
Slootman told us the only way you will win is if your customers defend you, which means
yep,
you have to be laser focused on being making sure that driving customer satisfaction, which is the reason why we have such like NPS score is through the roof, CSAT score is through the roof.
yep,
And he also told us like we had a customer sat or customer success team at that time was dismantled because he told us everyone has a customer success hat in this company moving forward.
yeah,
And that was a big change because it enabled people to just think differently, and again think about efficiency, right? It's that I became obsessed with productivity then. Before that it was like I'm just going to grow my number,
right.
and now I'm doing it very differently.
I love it. Yes, I still haven't gotten around to reading Amp It Up
Yeah.
just yet, but I think that um, I think that the notion of rigor and
Mm.
operational excellence and what have you is extraordinarily important to early stage companies and like mid stage and large stage companies. And I think the last like 5 to 10 years of like zero interest rates and easy money has really made it such that it kind of even for people who are maybe like obsessive and maybe a little bit nutty about that, like I've always been a very operationally minded person and kind of live a amp it up sort of life myself, for good or for bad. Just ask my wife. But in a larger environment where that's like not really in the water, so to speak, it's kind of hard to push that boulder uphill. And I think that things have changed pretty substantially in the last like 6 to 12 months in that regard. And I think that like now is the time for people to really kind of refocus on that. Now the good news is that the folks who have already had that mindset all along, they're like, all right, great, everyone stop taking crazy pills, sweet, right? They're not gonna they're not looking at me funny anymore. But I think the more that people can embrace it, the better off that they are there. And I think a lot of that means as sales leaders, making sure that we're effectively measuring our reps on their productivity, their efficiency, right? Like it's not just adding a bunch of reps, like adding a bunch of humans that are getting the 30% of quota, but instead making sure that like everybody's getting to 80% of quota before we add more human beings, right? Like instead of relying on marketing, we got to make sure that our AEs are doing the relevant prospecting and like using their time for that and measuring that as well. Right, making sure that we're measuring good pipeline hygiene, because the opportunities that do come into the pipe are scarce and precious. So we better be taking a full swing at them and not kind of goofing off on them.
One thing that Slootman says in his book that is absolutely amazing is be a driver, not a passenger.
Sure, I love that. That's yeah.
Wise.
Elliot, are you here to kick us out?
Yes, I am going to wrap things up now. Thank you so much, guys. Always love having Adrian sponsor one of these events. Make sure to check them out. Let me grab all the links from today and make sure to get your free goodies, dude. They're good. I like them. Big thank you to Pete and Mark for providing the content. Recordings and key takeaways are going to be available on our page shortly. Don't forget to check out our upcoming events, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care, everybody.
Cool. Thanks, Mark. You're the best.
Thank you.